Welcome to A Healthier, Happier You, the people working to make it happen. I'm Evan J. Cholfin from Luxhammer, where we help the brands that help you live healthier. Joined by Kiaya Woulfe, CEO of Luce's Bakehouse, who is crafting exceptional gluten-free breads in their dedicated allergen-free, friendly facility in Bend, Oregon. Her insights into building a successful specialty food brand are invaluable for our audience. Kiaya, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Evan. It's great to be here. I'm excited to chat today.
Absolutely. So, what's the origin story behind Luce's Bakehouse?
I love that question. I love to talk about our origin story because it's personal and it's really special to me. I've sort of always been entrepreneurial. I went to school and got a business administration degree. So did my husband, Sean. We met in school, and before we graduated, after we graduated, we kind of always played with different startup concepts. None that have really taken off the way that Luce's Bakehouse has. And then a couple of years ago, we're both diagnosed with gluten intolerances, which, if you've never experienced, is a pretty life-changing thing when you have to give up something as big as gluten. I think one thing that people don't always realize is that it's pervasive and it's everywhere. And we just lived with that on our own. But major disappointments in the space of bread, in the space of bagels, those things are just so hard to find a great alternative, and especially alternatives that aren't loaded with a bunch of artificial ingredients that you've never heard of before. So we were kind of personally struggling through that journey and simultaneously thinking, what's the next business idea we're going to try out? And in the most serendipitous way, I was scrolling through our local co op newsletter and found a posting from Charles Luce that he had a gluten free business up for acquisition. And what that looked like was really a lot of IP that Charles had spent decades developing when he ran a gluten free bakery in New Jersey. That was Luce's gluten free artisan bread. And Charles eventually retired, moved out to Bend. It's a beautiful place to spend those years. But he didn't want his recipes to just disappear into the mist when he was no longer here. So Charles was searching for somebody with a little bit of a business mind. He had actually gone through a few folks who came from a baking background, but had kind of thought, like, I know what the struggles are. And he had come from more of the creative and baking background and ran into some struggles of actually running a business. So it was like all of the stars aligned for us to find Charles at the time that he was looking for somebody like us to take on these recipes and to really just restart a Luce's business with his catalog of recipes. That's how we got started. And we actually didn't start selling any baked goods until Memorial Day weekend last year was the first time that we hopped into a farmer's market or that we delivered bread to any stores. So we're just coming up on our 1 year anniversary now.
Congratulations. It's
Thanks. Yeah,
exciting.
we're pretty excited.
Yeah. So, what makes your approach to gluten free baking unique in the specialty food space?
All sorts of things. We now have very strong opinions on what makes good gluten-free bread. So a few of the, principles that we always stick to is number one, having a sourdough component to every baked good. So not everything that we bake is a sourdough. We have our flagship sourdough bread that has that classic sour flavor and delightful, crispy crust, soft inside crumb. But we have bagels that taste, look, feel like real glutinous bagels without any wheat or any gluten involved. Same thing with our baguettes. And Charles has developed really wonderful make at home mixes where you just add water and you can have a complete, fully baked loaf of bread in under 2 hours, right? And so a lot of those things, they don't taste sour, but they all have a sourdough component in them because fermentation of those grains gives you such a leg up in texture and flavor of the baked good. Kind of a bonus, a lot of people find that when grains have been fermented, they kind of digest easier. So for some folks, that could really be a big plus as well. So that's number one, is no matter what we do, there's some level of sourdough component in it. But beyond that, we stick to organic grains and starches. Basically, anywhere we can put an organic ingredient, we do. And then we always use whole grains. So, we get some whole grain flours, but for the bulk of what we use in our breads, like our sorghum and our millet, and even some of our brown rice, we actually mill those in house to get the desired consistency that we like. So, one thing that you'll find if you go to the grocery store and you buy any grain flour, even if it's a gluten free grain like a buckwheat or a millet, is it's going to be incredibly fine. And we like a little bit of variance, and we're very particular about the texture of our grains. So we mill in house, we use organic whole grains, it's the sourdough components. We do everything by hand right now. We do consider ourselves an artisan bakery. Every bagel is shaped by hand, every loaf of bread is weighed by hand. Everything we do is by hand. And we keep our ingredients really, really simple. So, one of my pet peeves with the larger gluten free bread brands that you can find in nationwide grocery stores is that a lot of the stuff that's in them is stuff that I've never heard of before looking at that label. And you're kind of wondering, like, why is this here? A big reason is preservative, but another reason is time shortcut, right? Adding a sourdough component to every single baked good is something that we do that adds a lot of time to our process, but in our opinion, it's worth it in terms of texture and flavor. And that allows us to keep everything so simple. So, every single ingredient that you see in one of our product labels is going to be something that you could go to a grocery store and buy on your own. It's not anything that's artificially created that you have to go to some specialty distributor to find any of those ingredients. So those are like the core ethos that we stick to. There's a lot of other stuff that we do that, makes our bread what it is, but those are kind of the core values that drive every single product to be, in our opinion, some of the best gluten-free alternatives that are out there.
That's great. And so, who do you serve best? What's your ideal customer profile?
Sort of anyone who's got a dietary restriction. We obviously gluten free folks are our core customer base, but we get people who have allergies to dairy or co allergens are actually really big. I think it's something like 40% of folks who have one dietary restriction have more than one dietary restriction. So for me, it's rice. I cheat on that a lot because if you look around, at gluten free labels, almost everything has brown rice flour in it, but our core sourdough doesn't, or corn, or whatever it is. Almost all of our products are totally vegan. So it's multiple dietary restrictions. So we try to serve as broad of an audience as possible for a few reasons. One of which being just providing a sense of normalcy and inclusion. Something that we noticed right away when we got diagnosed with our dietary restrictions was how hard it was to share a meal with other people. And we have like best friends who have a severe nut allergy and we can't eat gluten. And all of a sudden, the things that we can eat together and actually break bread together became very, very narrow. It became very hard to have that community experience of sharing a meal with the people that we loved. And so that is another thing that really drives us to create the products the way that we do with as many, allergy bases covered as possible is so that everybody can come together and enjoy something that tastes just as good as the original, but can really bring everyone in. So I may have gotten off track there, but that's those are some
That's
important
great.
things to me.
I love that. So, what's been your biggest challenge in growing Luce's Bakehouse this year?
Let me count the things, I guess. I think one of the huge challenges that may not be an issue for everybody, but it is an issue for us, is actually commercial space. So in Bend, we are very lucky to have a couple of commissary kitchens. The demand for commissary kitchens here is probably much higher than the supply, though. That's an ever shifting thing. I really wish that we had more commercial kitchen space available because trying to build out your own is really expensive. So we started out in a commissary kitchen, but that's not an allergy friendly space. It was like we would go in there, we would have to truck in all of our equipment, load it all up in my SUV, unload it, and we would have to wipe down everything and constantly be going back behind ourselves like, Did we wash that before we touched it? To really try and make sure that our product was as celiac safe as it could be. And that became exhausting very quickly. So we immediately had the challenge of space, which we may touch on later, but I was able to find a space that we were able to take over in sharing with a few other gluten-free businesses to come up with a totally gluten-free kitchen space. But honestly, so much of that was just luck and timing that I was so desperate at the time that I responded to a Craigslist ad that had no photos on it, and I still showed up. I was like, "Is this a real kitchen? Can I see it? I need to know." So, anyway, space is a big challenge. Now that we're in there, we're growing so quickly. That means we need to add more electrical capacity. Do we even have the space for more ovens? Like, is that okay with the other businesses that are in the space? So, that's one of the challenges that we're having right now is just managing that growth with very limited options for space. And we're definitely not in a position yet to be taking on our own lease on a commercial kitchen. Soon, but not today. So that's kind of a big challenge where we're at. And then I'll just throw out one more if I'm allowed to throw out more than one
Of
is
course.
meeting the gluten-free customer where they're at. So something that we've really noticed, we have 6 specialty grocers in the Greater Bend area right now who carry our bread. And we want to be in the fresh bread section. That's what we are. And what I've found is that so many gluten free customers are really conditioned to go to the middle aisles where you have, I don't know if you've ever seen them, they look like balloons, these big plastic packs full of air and like a little bit of gluten free bread. That's kind of how you package like your big names like Franz or Char that carry gluten free breads, right? And so folks are either going to the frozen section or to those middle aisles because that's where they're used to the gluten-free bread options being. And it's like, but hey, there's a locally baked fresh bread that's available for you. Look over here. And so that's part of it is just meeting people where they're at in that sense. Or now that we're shipping sourdough, our sourdough has an incredibly long shelf life, so we can ship that nationwide pretty easily. Not so with bagels, which I won't bore you with all of the dynamics of why bagels stale faster than bread, but it's just, the air can penetrate through the little hole in the middle of the bagel, and there's a lot more surface area for air to come in and start to stale a bagel. So it's like, how do we get that to people where they are? So those are two of the bigger challenges that we're facing right now. Figuring it out, to be in a position where those are the problems that we're having at only a year old, I'm still pretty happy with. So, grateful that those are the problems that I have to deal with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So, what makes it difficult to stand out in the growing gluten free market?
Price point is one. When you're a locally made artisan product and you stick to an ethos of organic whole grains and the time that it takes to be a real sourdough, I think there's a lot of customer education that has to be involved for folks to understand, okay, this is worth the higher price point of some of these bigger mass market gluten free brands. So that's a little bit of it. The other things that make it difficult to stand out. I mean, we are in a time, fortunately for everyone who's got a dietary restriction, where it's easier today than it's ever been to be diagnosed with a dairy allergy or a gluten allergy or a nut allergy and go out and find things that are free of that allergen or of multiple allergens. And that's an amazing thing. I love that for people. But because we're in this kind of like gluten-free new age era where like everybody's coming out with stuff, it's just I constantly like I follow all these gluten-free influencer accounts online that are like the college celiac or Phil hates gluten, shout out, love you guys. But they will often focus on what's coming out from national brands, which makes sense. They have a national audience, right? So it's like Sweet Lawrence comes out with a new cookie flavor or Char comes out with a new bread product. They're quick to get a lot of attention because they're easily accessed through all of your major grocery chains. And so that's the other thing that makes it kind of hard to stand out right now where we're small and trying to figure out whether or not national grocery distribution is even the right path for us. So It might be, it might not be. I don't know if we've fully figured that out yet. There's a lot of pitfalls, a lot of pros and cons to doing national grocery store distribution. So if we get there, great. I think that'll be a lot easier. But while we remain like, hey, our only national access is online, it's really getting people's attention and saying, hey, we're here. There's an alternative that's maybe a higher price point, but we swear it's worth it. And if we could get a sample in your mouth, you would know that. But if you live across the country, that's not going to happen. So it's like, trust us, please. This is actually much better tasting, much better texture, much longer shelf life, et cetera, et cetera. So getting that visibility and that customer education is something that we really have to put a lot of energy into.
So how do you address that with your D2C?
I mean, locally, the farmers market season is the best for us because we can sample everything. And what we've found is that once people try it, the conversion rate from try to buy is incredibly high. I think the last time we calculated it was like 80% of customers who sampled something at our farmers market booth bought something at our farmers market booth, which is a testament to how good it truly is. How we're going to take that a notch further, I have not fully figured out yet. But if one day I can put together like a sampler pack that I can mail to somebody, like that would be a dream come true. So no promises on when that might happen, but I would love for that to happen.
So what are your main growth targets for this year?
That's a great question. I am going to be totally honest. I stopped setting growth targets like 1 or 2 quarters ago when everything that I planned for constantly changed and outperformed what I planned for. So right now, I'm just going into farmers market season thinking that this is going to be my place to try things out on folks. We have a rye has gluten in it, so it's not actually rye, but we have a rye flavored roll that we're going to bring out. We're going to be getting our baguettes in front of people, additional mixes. We're bringing seasonal items back, like our blueberry muffins that people absolutely adore. Burger buns, all of these things that we've kind of been working on in the background to really get in front of people and see what are those top sellers, what are people really responding to. And then in the fall, post farmers market season, when we have the time and the mental energy and the clarity to really go to all of our grocery partners and say, okay, this is what worked well, let's bring that on. And then fall, especially going into the holidays, is a great time for us to bring on additional grocery partners because, pre-Thanksgiving, pre-Christmas, everybody's hitting the grocery store for all the things they want for their holiday parties and so on. So that's kind of our plan and our trajectory. But I'm not going to tell you like, hey, I plan to bring on 4 more grocery partners this year, because if you had told me this time last year that I would have 6 grocery partners and be shipping bread and have all these different avenues, I wouldn't have believed you. So who knows what year 2 has in store, truly. If we could bring on a restaurant this year, though, that is actually a goal and a dream that I have for this year that I'll be working pretty hard on, is to just bring our bread to a restaurant partner and really test those waters, if nothing else. I think our bread makes an excellent sandwich bread. And I personally, as a gluten-free eater, miss being able to go out and get like a delightful stacked up deli sandwich. So I want to provide that to the rest of the world in some way. So we're going to definitely have to try that out this year as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how are you currently acquiring most of your new customers?
Yeah, if we're being totally honest, Charles has a following. So he is an absolute star in the gluten-free baking space. And so we've been really fortunate that when we've launched any nationwide shipping product, we've gotten pretty immediate adoption from folks all over who know Luce's as a name and who are familiar with Luce's products. Whether we're rolling out something that they've had before or not, they're just receptive to the idea that, like, hey, if this has anything to do with Charles, it's really, really delicious and it's worth trying. So that's been really great in terms of, kind of taking those folks who've been on his mailing list and converting them and saying, like, hey, we're different owners, we're a different operation, but you're still going to get the same quality, same level of breads. And between that, farmers markets, and then word of mouth, I get phone calls on a regular basis from folks who are like, hey, my daughter's coming into town and she's celiac, and a friend told me about your bread. and I've got some questions, and where can I get it and what can I get? And I'm like, you know what? Tell me when your kid is going to be in town because we do bagels on this day. And if you didn't know that, like, you should probably know that like bagels would be a real treat for somebody who hasn't had them in a long time. And we hear that all the time. So we get new folks who are just looking out for friends or family members coming into town, and they explore us as a, we're a locally produced option. And when you're visiting somewhere, you have family coming into town, it's typically like, let me show you the stuff that is unique to my area. So that's been really fun to get those phone calls, talk to those people at farmers markets, or even just seeing those orders convert online. And I'll kind of ask people like, all right, you came, you bought something online. How did you hear about us? And it's like, well, I was just looking for something for my friend who's coming into town, which I think is so sweet. It's like going back to the personal bit of it. It's so heartwarming to see how many people are just looking out for a friend or a family member to make sure that they feel comfortable in the home. And then a last thing I'll throw out there is grocery store demos. So I don't know how much you've interviewed folks who do consumer packaged good that's sold through a grocery store, but I have a great time actually physically going to the store, setting up my pop-up table. I look like the folks at Costco that you tend to see, just a little bit differently branded. And folks love to come by and try a sample while they're doing their grocery shopping. So that's been another great opportunity for customer education and acquisition. And there are so many folks who are like, oh, I shop at this store all the time, but I've never seen your bread. And we're like, it's because we're in the fresh bread section. Go check it out. So those are some of the things that we're doing right now.
Yeah. So what's going to be crucial to get right in the next year?
Let me think on that for a hot second, because there's a lot. And I think that one of the things that we're always trying to get right is scaling a product without compromising on quality. So bagels are something that we kind of rolled out in the middle of winter just to get them out there. It'd been something that I've been eager to do because I'm a huge fan of bagels, right? But we know that going into the high season, we're going to have to produce more bagels than we've ever produced before. And so I was actually like watching these YouTube videos of like these New York bagel shops and how they roll their bagels. And it's like, okay, we've got to get the team together and we've got to workshop this, how we can all like hand roll these bagels at speed and at capacity without compromising on any of the texture, any of the ingredients, or any of the flavor in that bagel, but we've just got to figure out how we can scale it. And can we stick 24 bagels in a giant pot at the same time? How do we do that without compromising the temperature of the water and the boiling time, which are all critical things to impacting the texture of a bagel? So that's going to be the key thing for us to get right. I mean, any small business that's growing, it's like, you don't want to outgrow yourself and what you're able to actually, provide at quality. So that's the balance that we're going to really have to strike this year, especially when there's constantly opportunities in front of us for getting products to customers through new avenues and for getting new products to customers. It's just, okay, how do we do that without messing it up and making sure that it's really, truly worth it? Because there are a lot of gluten-free brands out there that you still have to pay extra for. Anyone who's gluten-free will tell you that there's a tax that comes with it. And there's actually a tax exemption. So like if you save all of your grocery receipts throughout the year and you can say like, I spent this much more on bread throughout the year just because I had to buy gluten-free bread, you can actually write it off on your taxes, which is kind of cool. So fun little tidbit for anyone who didn't know that. But anyway, sorry, getting off topic again. Where I was headed with that is that no matter what, you're going to pay more to get the gluten-free bread on your sandwich, or you're going to pay more to get the 12 pack of gluten-free bagels than you are to get, I said 12 pack, 4 pack of gluten-free bagels than you are to get probably even the 6 pack of regular non-gluten bagels. And so when folks are already having to do that for us, it's like, we want you to be so delighted that you made that choice, that you stuck to your diet. Like, sticking to a gluten-free diet can be really hard. We know a lot of people who cheat on it just because they miss the old stuff. And so it's like, we want, from a wellness perspective, where we really want to help people, is making it so easy to stick to that diet and making it so easy to make that choice of choosing gluten-free because it's delightful. So that's, you know, that's what we're trying to do.
I love that.
Yeah.
Delightful.
Delightful.
So, if we were to have this conversation again in 12 months, what would make you feel it's been a successful year?
A lot of things, probably. But I come from a perspective of start every day with gratitude, right? So at the very forefront, if we in year two were in not much of a different position than we are now, I would still be really grateful for where we are because of how far we've come in our first year in business. So, starting from that place of gratitude, but things that would make me feel like, wow, this year was a huge success would be basically scaling enough in our farmers market season to come out with a couple of products that we know are going to be year-round offerings. So if we take, say, those rye rolls to the farmers market, and that's one of the things that takes off where we're like, okay, we're selling rye rolls through grocery stores all year long because Central Oregon, it snows. We only have summer farmers markets. We don't have any year-round outdoor markets because it's way too freezing in the winter. So if we can take a couple things out of that, and like I said, if we can launch a successful restaurant partnership, the ideally two successful restaurant partnerships because I have two in mind. I have one that I really want them to do fresh bread baskets, and I have another one I want them to do sandwiches. So we'll see if we can nail down both. But if we can do that, and if we can scale our shipping arm, because shipping bread is a new thing for us, but some of the concerns around that are like surviving the challenges of weather and humidity. Like I shipped an order to Georgia the other day, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put this in an unlined paper bag because I actually want more permeability. I don't want to hold moisture in the bag going into a hot, humid environment, especially when Bend, the weather right now is still pretty cool in May. It's not cold, but it's like the highs are in the mid 60s. And then shipping to somewhere where it's in the 80s, it's dry here, it's wet there. It's like, okay, how do we survive all of these things and make sure that when the bread gets there, it's perfect? So to summarize, it's bringing a couple year-round products out of farmers market season, successfully scaling our shipping arm with all of the weather-related challenges that will crop up throughout the year, and it's, launching one or two restaurants. That would just be like chef's kiss, an incredible year for us. So those are some of the things that I'm looking forward to.
Love that.
Yeah.
So that's it for today's episode of A Healthier, Happier You, the people working to make it happen. A huge thank you to Kiaya Woulfe for sharing her insights and amazing work that Luce's Bakehouse is doing to help people live healthier, happier lives. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could benefit. And if you're a brand or business making an impact in health, wellness, or personal care, we'd love to help you grow. Connect with me at luxhammer.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep making a difference.